My brothers and sisters and my beloved confreres, a very hearty welcome to each one of you to the solemnity of the Epiphany. Today we are reminded of the arrival of the Magi, the wise men, to meet the King of Israel, Jesus the Messiah. As I was reflecting on this solemnity, I was reminded of a very interesting story in the life of a physics professor. He was taking classes regularly and always used to insist on one thing: all that is made can never be destroyed. Everything that is created or made has to be taking another shape or form. It becomes another energy. Nothing can ever be destroyed. One of the students got up and asked him the question, "Sir, I have got a doubt. Tell me, when the candle is put off, where does the fire go?" The professor was puzzled. It is said, thereafter, he never taught his students. He took a journey, rather a long journey, and became a Buddha in the course of time. Years later, he returned to that same city, and there he happened to meet that student who asked him that question once: when the candle is put off, where does the fire go? Now, holding his students on both his shoulders, the professor, who has now become a Buddha, looked into the eyes and told him, "My son, when the candle is put off, the fire is inside." Yes, when there is fire inside, you can never stop your search. You can never stop at only knowing. You become wise and more wise with the fire that is burning inside of us. Yes, my brothers, my sisters, today when we are celebrating this great remembrance of the Epiphany of the Lord, when we think about these Magi who came to meet Jesus from a distant land, we are made aware of this reality of moving from mere knowledge to that wisdom that can only come from the Lord. The term Epiphany means a sudden and great revelation. In the context of the Christian and Catholic teaching, Epiphany means the manifestation of Christ the King to the Gentiles as represented by the Magi. Today, Jesus is the Christ, the King, and that exactly is what the Gospel is teaching us. As all of us know, the Synoptic Gospels present many things parallelly. But even in the same Synoptic Gospels, we would find passages which are very specific to particular evangelists. For example, Luke speaks about the shepherds, about the manger, about the angels, and he alone insists and elaborates on that. Whereas something that is very specific to Matthew, we read today in the 2nd chapter of the Gospel of Matthew, about the child who is born in Bethlehem, how he grew up in Nazareth, about the Magi, about the flight into Egypt, and the return from Egypt. These are all very, very specific to Matthew the Evangelist. And that's where we see the focus of the Gospel of the day taken from the Gospel of Matthew. It was important at that time of Matthew the Evangelist, after the death, resurrection, and the ascension of the Lord, the Jewish Christians were still persecuted by the Jews of that time. Therefore, it was necessary to present Jesus Christ as the King, the Messiah who would redeem them. And this kingship and the kingdom of Jesus is already prophesied by Micah the prophet. He narrates that the governing king will emerge from Bethlehem. We would also see in the Gospel of Matthew, Bethlehem is mentioned as part of the hill country of Judea. We will see in the Gospel of Luke that it is the city of David. David as a shepherd who became the king, and later Jesus is depicted as the king of Israel, is not an accidental happening. The lineage of David the great king is taken over by Jesus the Messiah and presented to the humanity as a redeeming message of a king who can only give them salvation in their lives. It is here that we see the other figure of Herod the king coming before us. What a contradiction we see in this man's life. Herod, in fact, was the king of Judea, which was part of the Roman Empire. He ruled Judea from 37 BC till 4th BC. He was known to be a very notorious and a reckless king. He killed 3 of his own sons, and he wanted to kill many of the priests and Pharisees of that time. Fortunately, he died before that. But one thing that we notice about his curiosity to know who this great king who is born in Israel is not because he was afraid of the birth of this Messiah, but because he thought that there would be a political unrest which can cause disturbance in the country. And he commands that all the male-born children be killed. The cruelty of a king is contagious. This is precisely what we notice, my dear brothers and sisters. One of the things, when the leader is not on a focused lifestyle, the followers will also equally be destroyed and disturbed. We see in the gospel mentioned, King Herod and the whole of Jerusalem was afraid and disturbed as to who this king is. When the king is afraid, when the king is disturbed, the followers and the whole nation will be disturbed. Don't we experience this disturbance in our time as well? The leadership of the church, the leadership of the country, the leadership of the whole world should be focused leadership where brotherhood, peace and serenity emerge. Otherwise, always there will be disturbance because the leader is not focused. It's here that we see the difference between knowledge and wisdom. The gospel mentions the Magi came from the east. As all of us are aware, the east mentioned in the gospel is the other side of the river Jordan, which means it could be the Arabian countries. And most probably, this concept of these 3 persons developed in the course of the history. They were named in the 7th AD as Caspar, Melchias and Balthasar. We would also notice from the way, the kind of gifts they have brought in, gold, myrrh and frankincense, which were the so-called gifts that were available in the Arabian nations. But one thing we notice here is this. They were people who were on a search. They wanted to know more, but be infilled by the grace that is given to them by God through that wisdom that they can receive only from God. This is here we see the difference of the Magi's attitude. They did not come to see the king. The gospel clearly mentions they came and worshipped him. Universal salvation is the message of the Gospel of Matthew today in the context of the celebration of the solemnity of Epiphany. My brothers, my sisters, We who are so much addicted only to have bookish knowledge should also understand knowledge that emerges from the awareness and acquiring aspect of our life can be limited. An infilled grace is the need of the time to make us wise people who know better. The story, or rather the life story of the Magi should inspire us today. Their message is very clear. Jesus is the King. He is the leader who can redeem us. He brings home to us the universal salvation, which is not limited to a particular nation, particular religion, or a particular people. Instead, everyone who is willing to open up their hearts and minds to receive that grace from above to distinguish an ordinary king from the Redeemer, the King of Israel, Jesus Christ. May this King bless each one of us. Amen.